So, look, let's assume the hype's borne out later in the summit, and we have this one-in, one-out deal, 50 illegal arrivals a week being sent back. It is tempting to say, so what, when you consider that 2,000 arrived in small boats in the last 7 days alone.
Yeah, so 50 out of 2,000 doesn't really hit the sides. And what I'm very interested about this is that we've done deals with the French before. I mean, we've given them something like £850 million over the last 10 years to try and tackle this. And it's very unclear to me, you know, what they've done to deserve the money. So they're kind of repackaging a deal, but I'm not sure what they've been doing for the last 10 years. And I think the government has to really hold their feet to the fire, and we've got to be more aggressive with them
this week
in terms of getting a good deal for us.
Yeah, this week we saw the bizarre image of a police officer, French police officer, getting a knife to stab a boat, a rubber dinghy, in order that it deflated and obviously couldn't then make its way into the water. But this morning, our reporter is out on the beaches of northern France, and along with other media, and has images of this boat setting sail, and presumably it's still on its way right now, with other photographers also taking photographs. Clearly, you know, it was very likely that a boat was going to take off this morning, but not a police officer in sight. Now, of course, we're very sympathetic to the fact that there's hundreds of miles of beach there, but if our crew and all the other photographers know that this boat's going to set off, where's the police intelligence?
I don't know, is the answer.
But don't you think, as you look at these pictures, I mean, all the photographers knew that boat was going to take off.
Not just on that beach, that boat operated like a taxi. It was going along the coastline, picking up more and more and more
This is an absolutely huge problem. There is no doubt about it. And by the way, anybody who thinks it's kind of heroic or a good thing for these people to be getting on these boats, absolutely not. It's horrific, it's dangerous. And, you know, more and more people are losing their lives in the Channel. These networks are incredibly difficult to disrupt. I was watching an interview, in fact, I've interviewed himself, this guy who's part of this great podcast about To Catch a Scorpion, which is all about trying to kind of how they've basically infiltrated some of these networks. It's really worth listening to.
The smuggling gangs.
Smuggling gangs and the actual sort of big people, like the kind of kingpin sort of people traffickers. And, I mean, their ingenuity kind of knows no one. You've got two things. You've got people who are absolutely hell-bent on using every trick in the book and every device to do this. The other thing is that you have got migrants who, for whatever reason, have absolutely decided that they want to come to this country. Now, on top of that, you've got conflict, you've got famine, you've got... The pull factor to Europe is absolutely huge.
But that's the push factor, so I get that.
The pull factor to this country seems to be uniquely huge. We've seen what Macron was alleged to have said this week, what one of his MPs said back in France, that basically Britain needs to look to its laurels. We need to look at the fact that we are actually, compared to other countries on the continent, a soft touch. And that is one of the reasons that we are attracting so many.
Definitely.
But I'd like to put this here, I'd just like to know what you think. This deal that may be announced today, 50 going back a week, the stabbing with the knives of the dinghy, 3 or 4 days ago. It just seems like tokenism, doesn't it?
It doesn't seem real. I mean, when you say 2,000 in the last 7 days and you compare that with 50, you know, you don't need to be a mathematician to work out that 50 isn't a very large amount compared to the people who are actually coming in. I'm very interested that the government started off saying they're going to smash the gangs, because that seemed to be an intelligent and reasonable thing to approach, to solve it. But I don't know what they've done in that regard, and they don't seem to be talking about that anymore. It seems to be about doing a deal with the French, but the French aren't necessarily going to help us smash the gang.
Yeah, they're dealing with it as a terror offence as well.
Well, I mean, to be fair to them, and listening to some kind of real sort of experts in this field, while they say it's very, very difficult to ever completely smash these gangs, they have acknowledged that some of the work that has gone in is the right thing to do. And also there have been some sort of agreements with countries like Iraq, for example, which are important. But this is a really, really difficult problem to solve. Also, I think when we talk about this, we do sometimes forget that as much as this is a very difficult issue, there's also great stories of tragedy and there's human beings involved.
Yeah,
in
but no
all
one
of
denies
this.
that.
But some of the discourse you do hear. I mean, I've had people message me saying these people should just be shot in the sea.
Well,
look at the effigy in Northern Ireland, in County Tyrone, which is set to be set alight tonight. An effigy of a small boat with human figures in it. Stop the boats is the slogan. It's almost like the Wicker Man.
Very
Be set fire unless the police step in, because it may be seen as a hate crime. That is due to be set fire after dark tonight. I mean, it's terrible, but it underlines and it reveals the level of public simmering discontent.
There is, but I don't think we should accept that the scenes that we've seen recently in Northern Ireland, which we've discussed on this show, where they were sort of going around and trying to knock on the door of migrants' houses and set fire to migrants and things like that. You can be upset at the situation, but that is different from literally going around and sort of attacking people. But in terms of going back to some of the solutions, and by the way, I don't think there's an easy way to solve this, but one thing which I do think should be looked at, and we were discussing this with some colleagues and politicians yesterday, is one of the things that Macron has said, which I think there's some truth in, is that people can come here and kind of disappear into a sort of, a black market. I do think the time, and the government is looking to do this for nationals, but maybe the time for proper ID cards has come, because that is something, and, different people have proposed this. The Tony Blair Institute has proposed this. We have so much of our information digitalised anyway. This would help crack down on illegal employment.
So that's what Labour... they came up with that policy, I don't know, 25 years ago. It was a long time ago. And civil liberties people were against it. I'm actually not against it now, because obviously circumstances have changed. There's a lot of digital information about people that you can have.
How would it crack down? Because one of the biggest pull factors is considered to be illegal working.
That's right.
That asylum seekers who are not allowed to work while their claim is being heard do just disappear into the system and do take on jobs. And the Home Secretary and the government say that they're cracking down on that. But just, Kwasi, how would ID cards work? Because...
It's like having a passport.
Right.
But
we, people do have passports, and of course asylum seekers probably may not have their passports. So will they not just not have ID cards and
still have a black economy, wouldn't you?
Yeah, but you could
doing illegal work?
You could do things like fine employers who employ people...
Presumably it's already the law.
Yeah, but you can police it more rigorously. And with an ID card, it's not... people don't lumber around with their passports on them, whereas an ID card would help.
But an asylum seeker, presumably, or someone who's got into a boat wouldn't be going around with an ID card.
Once they don't have an ID card, anyone who employs them will be liable to a substantial fine or penalty.
What you sense the British public is crying out for is a radical, definitive solution.
But Richard, there isn't one.
You're saying that there isn't one.
But that's not just me saying that. That's
of a failure to perform the function that is one of the primary functions of any government, of any country, which is to keep their borders secure. We seem to have completely abrogated that.
I think that's the fear. I think that's what people are thinking, and I think they're reasonable to think that.
2,000 in a week and 50 back a week.
Do the math.
There is also, to take a step back, one of the reasons why the public, and I completely accept this, have totally lost faith in the immigration system is they have seen the numbers absolutely shoot up, both in terms of illegal immigration and legal immigration. Remember, this country was told that after Brexit we're going to get control of our borders, and the numbers shot up. It's also worth saying that before we left the EU, we did have a returns agreement scheme called the Dublin Agreement Scheme, where people could be sent back to the first country in which they arrived in Europe. That's all gone post-Brexit. But the reality is, Richard, and I go back to my original point that I made at the start of this discussion, and I'm not saying I'm happy about this, but you speak to the international experts that follow this. We are moving into an era of more conflict, climate change, famine. People are going to keep coming to Europe.
So that's a push factor.
Yeah.
I get that. But there are pull factors here which make Britain attractive.
Can I just,
which we should be clamping down on.
Because our reporter, Nick Dixon, did speak to those who were planning to get into boats, and it's interesting to hear what they told him.
I want work, yes. I want new life. I want new possibility.
What job? Which job?
Any job.
Do you want to get a job?
In England? Yeah, of course.
What kind of a job do you want to get?
I don't know what. I will check what I get.
Let's just say you went to the UK, okay? What would you do when you got there?
It depends. It depends on what is the government's going to do for me.
So it's a group of people who see opportunity. I mean, you know, clearly in those cases, we don't know what their asylum claim might be if they do, in fact, make it to our shores. But clearly, it's economic opportunity.
Of course, it's attractive. I mean, you've got to be, open to that. I totally accept Aisha's point about the push factors from where they're coming, the wars and the conflicts. But you've also got to be honest and say, look, the UK is attractive to many people for the reasons that, a lot of those people who were interviewed.
You could also say, if they are there as a result of push factors, that at least, Aisha, they're saying, we'd like to work. In
some of them didn't say that. They
said, one said, I'll see what the government has to do for me.
That's right, which was not work.
Well, look, I think there is also an argument for, we look at across this country and we do have a lot of labour shortages and vacancies. If there are kind of fit, willing people who are willing to work and they could pay their taxes, is there not a way to sort of say, look, is there some sort of deal to be done? Because we have lots of vacancies here, particularly post-Brexit, whether it's agriculture or whatever. So, but look, this situation is incredibly difficult.
It is difficult, but we need to find a solution.
We're not going to find it on Good Morning Britain as much as I love.
No, but when you say about the fact that there are job vacancies, in the debate about welfare last week, it was very striking that we've got 9 million people of working age who aren't working. So there's a real mismatch here.
There is.
Between the vacancy...
And now we'll find out.
Historically, it's very difficult to get those people into
no debate about is the failure of your lot when you were in, the failure of the present lot now that they're in to deal with this is driving people to reform. And a big front-page story in many of the papers this morning is that a former Conservative Party chairman, I mean, this is the most senior Conservative defection so far, Sir Jake Berry, has defected to reform. In a blistering statement, I mean, it's been described as a hammer blow. He says, our streets are lawless, migration is out of control, taxes are going through the roof, and every day I hear from people in my community who are saying the same thing, this isn't the Britain I grew up in. So he has defected to reform, and as we know, reform is consistently, it's not a rogue poll, it's consistently ahead in the polls, and it does look a distinct possibility, not a certainty, that their leader, Mr Farage, is going to be the next Prime Minister.
Well, it could happen. I mean, I checked before, I think just earlier this week. They've been ahead, and your viewers will correct me, on something like the last 50 polls. Every single poll for the last few weeks, certainly since the local elections, they've been first. I don't know what Jake's motivations are. I mean, he got elected as a Conservative in my
seat, Maybe he wants to be an MP again, and he's looking at the polls.
But put it this way, he won't be the only person. If that's the case, he won't be the only Tory looking at the numbers, thinking maybe I've got a better chance of getting in with the other guys. I think that's a shame, but people are very focused on what the outcome might be. And you're right. I think Nigel Farage has got a chance of becoming Prime Minister. Having said that, we've got 4 more years, and a lot can happen in that time. So I wouldn't want to prejudge that. But clearly, Reform are in a strong position, and if they keep their numbers up, I imagine more of my former colleagues, Tories, might think about defecting.
Because some of those who defected, not to put too fine a point on it, were a little eccentric, you might say. This is a serious defection.
Yeah, I mean, Jake is a serious person. He was very much kind of a hatchet man. I mean, as a friend
of mine.
He's an operator. And he was quite a sharp operator. And the fact that he lost his seat, and I suspect he probably wants to get back, and he might well be thinking, well, if Reform are on 28% and the Tories are on 18%, maybe I've got a better chance of getting back as a
And meanwhile, the support, the public support so far, as you say, things could change for Reform, does seem to, in part to be based on their promise and Farage's guarantee that if they win, they will deal with immigration.
I don't think they'll deal with... I mean, my problem with Reform is that you can say, yes, the Tories failed, Labour are failing, or you can make a judgment on them. But I don't think Reform are necessarily going to have all the answers.
Oh, I couldn't agree more.
I don't think they're
promising.
They're promising,
and also,
you can do that in
one of their own MPs, another one of their own MPs, has just lost the party whip.
Yeah, for fraud, essentially. I mean, he's being
allegations
investigated for that.
Yeah,
right.
exactly. So they can't currently kind of hang
Well, they
on to the
haven't done the
MPs that
vetting.
they've
They haven't done the
they've
vetting
got
that
within the
they should have
party.
done.
There is no doubt that there is a huge amount of momentum behind reform at the moment. I was at
Aisha, can I ask, do you think it's because it's behind reform or it's behind Tories were in power 14 years, highest taxes, high inflation, everything seemed to stop working. Labour haven't suddenly changed everything in a year. We'll just go with the other guys.
I think it's two factors. I'd say it's three factors, actually.
OK.
I'd say disillusionment in the main two parties, definitely. I think people do really like Nigel Farage, and I think they are absolutely...
Some people.
I think I'm no fan of the guy, but he just connects with people. He's a good communicator.
He is a good operator.
And I'd say also... Reform are just fated by the media at the moment. They're given in these... I was at the Spectator summer party a couple of weeks ago, which is the Tory Bible. Now, poor Tory cabinet ministers were in the corner. No one really cared about them. The VIP section was literally a terrace. The VIP section, reform.
Reform.
And that's the Tory Bible.
OK.
So... I think what is fascinating is looking at people like Jake Berry. Andrea Jenkins was another high profile. She's now the mayor of Lincolnshire. There's going to be more of these defections because a lot of Tories are very opportunistic. They were like Tory till I die. Now they're like, I'd like to come back and be an MP. But look, you have to take reform seriously. But what I will agree with Kwasi on is that reform are riding really high. Can they sustain that for the next 4 years? And when any of their policies come under any kind of scrutiny, they do not add up. Now, Richard, they say they're going to wave a magic wand, they're just going to make this migrant problem disappear. I've got a bridge to sell you right now. They are not going to.
Oh, I'm agreeing
with
you.
They also say
I'm
that they're going
what they're saying.
They had another thing. They're going to get millionaires not to pay any tax anymore, and the IFS is like, well, where's the tax going to come in for public services? None of their stuff sounds amazing because. There's that phrase, if it sounds too good to be true, it normally is.
OK.
So, yeah.
The junior doctors, as we used to call them.
What do we call them now?
Resident doctors.
Resident, okay.
Yeah. Going on strike again. A bit later this month. We all thought when Labour won the election that had been sorted out, they'd been bought off. They want more.
I think that's what Wes Streeting thought.
But some of us said at the time, because they said the reason why we've done these public sector union deals is to stop strikes. We want to give people, the unions, essentially what they wanted, and then they'll behave. But they haven't. So they've done deals with many public sector workers, and we've found that they're now on strike. And the junior doctors, I think they're asking for, is it 29% on top of the 22% that they got before? So, they're really, trying their luck. I think the Health Secretary is doing the right thing and saying, no, it's actually going to be the Treasury who will decide on this, and they clearly don't have the money.
So we're back to where we were over a year ago.
Yeah, and they've already got the deal. They've already secured the deal they had last year, and now they're asking for. But
in terms
more.
of people missing operations, missing appointments.
Yeah, I think it's terrible. And we had this debate earlier, a few months ago, about doctors being able to strike, because it seems to me that they're just like the police force who aren't allowed to strike. So, that reopens that debate.
Yeah, and the thing is, Aisha, whatever you might think about the fact that, doctors say their pay has not risen, to keep up with the cost of living, and of course they save lives every single day and we're totally reliant on them. We now have 5 days where these doctors will be on strike, which means that if you need to go into hospital for any of those 5 days, you're going to be more vulnerable, frankly, than you would have been.
Look, there's no doubt that doctors and lots of other public sector workers have seen sort of wage stagnation because of inflation going up so much. So that is an absolute factor that lots of workers across the board who do really important work, doctors do important work, nurses do important work, lots of teachers do important work, lots of people do important work. I mean, it will be a real tragedy if these strikes go ahead because what has changed, Richard, is you are beginning to see some progress on waiting lists have been consistently coming down. I'm not saying it's all great at all.
And 4 million extra appointments.
You are starting to see results coming down, and lots of kind of independent commentators will say that. The government's just announced a really pretty good 10-year plan for the NHS. Lots of kind of good innovation happening. So I just really hope that some kind of deal can be done on this.
All right, really important.
I also think the public, who did really support the doctors, I'm not sure they will carry on supporting them.
Well, that was a good question. We'll find out. A really important question this morning is, should the BBC be showing the Greg Wallace series, the new series of MasterChef, because they've got them ready to go. They've got nearly a dozen programmes, I think, and they're now meeting at the BBC to think, can we legitimately show this, given that we've just sacked the bloke?
I think they can't do it, because they've said that this person isn't essentially fit and proper. I mean, that's not the language they're using, but that was the implication. He's been dismissed. And so why would you then show the series of which he's the kind of centrepiece?
And you can't cut him out, because he's central, you know.
No, but I think they've got to take
thing.
the hit. I mean, they should have thought about that before they sacked him. But you can't have it both ways. You can't sack somebody and then use them, you know, to essentially to promote one of your shows. That's my view.
The trouble is, of course, then you have however many contestants from MasterChef who, you know, this wasn't a celebrity MasterChef. This is the original MasterChef. They all thought that they were having the time of their lives, you know, and this is an opportunity for them. And you know, along the way, there are people who someone's won.
Yep.
That will never get shown because of the failures over one individual. But so they'll pay the price, won't they?
It's not just one individual, is it? It's the people, his victims, if you like, who've had a pretty awful time. And
the failure of the production company.
Yeah,
I mean, when one woman went to complain about him exposing himself,
yeah, that's true.
Apparently said, well, you haven't been Jimmy Savilled.
Yeah,
oh,
exactly.
God, you know, I mean,
absolutely.
how not
so
to
I think
handle
it's, you know, I take your point, Susanna. You know, for the contestants, it's really, really sad. But what happened was pretty bad. I do agree with Kwasi on this. But the other thing that I feel really kind of annoyed about is his sort of excuses. He's now kind of saying, oh, I'm autistic. And there's a lot of people who have autism and neurodiversity. They're not going around exposing themselves or doing it. And it's just, you know, it's such a weak, pathetic
So
excuse.
whatever you think about what he did, and it's pretty reprehensible, I think for the BBC to sack him and then blame him, but then to use the footage of him, you know, doing his thing, and then broadcast that, I think is completely inconsistent.
He denies he's done anything other than use inappropriate language. He says he'll fight.
Yeah, of course he's going to say that. He's not going to say...
No, but we need to say that.
Sure.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I think for the BBC, I think it's hypocritical of the BBC to sack him for behaving badly and then to try and essentially get ratings and use him in the show.
Well, we say the BBC sacked him. Of course, the programme was made by an independent production company managing for the BBC.
That's
but
right.
anyway, that's
But
how
the
it
other big
works.
takeaway from this has happened a lot. And any big broadcaster, but particularly the BBC, because it is taxpayer funded, they have to have better oversight over these independent production companies. And these independent production companies have got to think, if they're looking for a gig with the BBC, they almost inhabit the mantle of the BBC, and they have to sharpen up their kind of behaviour and their practices.